Hey guys, here we are on Econ Day 3. Before we get started, just a couple questions I want you to think about up here on the PowerPoint slide. There's six of them. I want you to answer them true or false. We're going to be talking about income mobility today, but just in your brain, maybe on a scrap piece of paper, whatever, write down your answers true or false for those six things. Pause the video if you are still thinking about them. We're going to move forward. So one of the big talking points in the American economy is, how can people become successful if they come from, a low income situation? And um, those questions kind of had to do with that. And you can kind of see, especially like with number one and number two, with do people get rewarded for their effort? So this is an older statistic, but the green dot is the US on average. So like true, people get rewarded for their effort. True, people get rewarded for their skills. False, coming from wealth is essential to getting ahead. Are the rich too rich or too poor? So true that the rich are too rich and the poor are too poor. All right. And then, should the government do things about it? And a lot of people in the United States say false. Now, this statistic is from like 2005, the years down here. It's covered up on my video. And I would say that this number has probably creeped up here. I don't know for sure. They haven't asked it from what I've seen lately, but I would say this number is a little bit different than what it used to be. We are going to talk about some of the stats that we see in terms of what we refer to as income mobility. If I'm born into a poor situation, am I guaranteed to stay there, or do I have a likelihood of becoming, successful, so to speak? Or if I start out successful, am I guaranteed to be somewhere where I'm not going to be, or I'm going to stay there? So here's the stat that we're going to kind of reference today for a little bit. Okay, we have all right, the five quintiles. And the quintiles are basically the government just went through and they divided people into five equal groups. So if there was 100 people, they took the 20 richest people, they were the top. Next 20, next 20, next 20, and then the bottom 20. Okay, so how much money you made wasn't necessarily important except for the fact that it just puts you in a ranking, so to speak. Okay, now these graphs, so these are the top 20 people, right? And this was assuming let's just say there was 100 in the top 20. So let's say there was 500 people. Okay. So if there was 100 in the top 20, okay, 40%, 40 of those 100 stayed in that top five when they got older. Okay. So they're born into it. 40 of them stayed in that income situation, that quintile. 22, 23 were the next best. 15 or so, 15 or so. And then down, we have about 8 to 10 that ended up at the bottom. So obviously not a situation where it's guaranteed. I would say obviously it helps to come from wealth and start out at the top, but it doesn't mean that you necessarily stay there. You can see the stats from the next 20%, the next 20%, the next 20%. And these green ones are pretty even, right? It's kind of a coin flip almost. Now you're a little bit more likely to be less successful if you're down here. Definitely a coin flip. A little more likely to be more successful if you're over here, but again, a lot less disparity from the green ones than you see in the blue ones. Now, the bottom ones, okay, and they use the term sticky, right? The bottom ones, if you started out at the bottom, you had a 42% chance. So if there was 142 of them stayed in the bottom. Over 20% moved up one spot. Just under 20% moved up to the middle, and you can kind of see, where things head after that. Okay, only about a 5 or 6% chance to end up in the top. Okay, so anyway, just kind of some stats there, halfway interesting. All right, the stats go a little bit further. Okay, and what they did was they took the top group. Okay, the people that were born into the richest, and then they took the bottom group, the people that were born into the poorest families in the United States, and then they took it how many people went to college. Okay, and they said, well, in the richest families, 53% of people finish college. If you finish college, obviously the success rate can be pretty well seen. If you don't go to college, right? Only now it's really almost exactly a coin flip. We really don't know how those people are going to end up. right? Now, on the flip side, maybe the most disturbing stat of this stuff is that 89% of low income teenagers, I guess, do not finish college. That's 9 out of 10 people, right? So that's a very large number. Now, if you go to college and finish, well, that's your equalizer, right? Now, my question would be, and I've asked this before, I asked it last week, is do motivated people go to college or do smart people go to college? Maybe I should say finish college, right? And so I would say motivated people finish college. Okay. Now, I think that it's easier to be motivated if your parents are motivated, right? And are motivating you. I think it's difficult to be motivated if you are in some of these types of situations. You've got a few different polls, polling on you. But the good news is that the government does subsidize, meaning that they do give low income people quite a bit of money to go to college. They want you to do that and try to better yourself. And so, anyway, those are the stats. Okay. I can't explain them all for sure, but those are the stats that you're going to kind of be reading about a little bit later on. Let's see here. What else we want to mention briefly? Sorry for the delay there. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk briefly about is what is referred to as the wage gap. And I think we are all pretty familiar with, the disparity in wages between two groups of people. Okay, we've got men versus women, and then we've also got minorities versus whites. Okay, and so um, there's a bunch of different stats out there. You can pause it to look at them. You can see that on average, women as of 2017 made about 82% of what men make. And as I look at this, the interesting thing that I think about is, if I think about a job that a woman would not be able to do as effectively as a man, right? Just kind of off the top of my head, not to pick on women or whatever, but think about one that like a construction type job. Like, okay, sometimes men are stronger in most cases than women, not always, but men would be more capable of doing those types of jobs in certain instances. And then I think about the opposite. And I say, okay, well, what kind of job could a woman do as good as a man? And like intelligence type jobs, and if not better than a man, intelligence type jobs like a lawyer or, a salesperson or those types of things. Then I look at these stats, and kind of the alarming thing to me is that construction workers up here, right? That's like the closest one. Women make in comparison to other careers, women make as close to as much as men as other things. And then I look down here and I'm proven completely wrong off the top of my head, right? That okay, legal stuff. Legal stuff is where women are basically most discriminated against, and just kind of interests me. So got to me thinking, and we have a lot of laws in place that are in place to say that you cannot discriminate based on age, race, sex, gender, on how you pay people. And so if I'm an employee of someone, if I'm a woman and I'm an employee of someone, they can't discriminate me against me. So that's probably why this number is so close. But who hires lawyers? Right. And it's not necessarily me going to a lawyer and someone appointing a lawyer for me, right? It's me hiring a lawyer. And so the discrimination, I think, in a lot of cases actually just comes from common people that say, hey, listen, if I'm going to have a fight for my legal freedom, right, I might say, okay, maybe a man can do better than what a woman can do for me. I'm not saying that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that might be how people think. Okay, and so just kind of interesting. I don't know all the causes, but those are some of the challenges of our economy right now in terms of um, well, wages. Okay, we can also look at different races. Okay, so I got a red star here for our column that we'll kind of focus on, and we've got different ages here, and you can probably already assume that the older you become, the more money you make. And here's your big numbers. Here's whites on average, both men and women. You can look at it a little closer if you want. Here's African Americans, Asians, and Hispanics, right? And you kind of wonder, well, there's definitely some disparity in numbers, but if we were completely discriminatory, Asians would not make as much money as whites. And so, kind of just tying this into like the educational standpoint, right? Access to education. Well, obviously, here in the United States, whites have had the longest access to education, right? If you go to African Americans, right, they've probably had the second longest access to education in terms of this group of people. You've got to remember, a quick history lesson here, that up until 1863, right? That's the Emancipation Proclamation, 1863, right? The reason the Civil War was fought, slaves or African Americans were slaves, right? And so they are stuck on slave plantations. It's illegal for them to learn how to read, okay? And it's illegal for them to go to school, so they're not getting any education. So slavery ends in 1863, right? What options do the former slaves have? They didn't really have very many options. Okay, a lot of them stayed there. There's a term for it. Okay, it was referred to as sharecropping. And basically what happened was the former slaves, they still lived on the land. They had, housing. They had some sort of system in for them getting food that they were already basically living off and not getting paid. And a lot of them were kind of stuck there. And if you study how our civil rights movement went, it's not until the 1960s that segregation is legally eliminated, right? And now blacks have the same educational access as what whites have. And so again, I think that it can be argued that a lot of blacks are playing a little bit of catch up in terms of trying to catch how many people are educated versus the white population. I think that helps explain it. I don't think it's the only explanation. I think we're naive to say that those types of that discrimination doesn't exist. Okay, but again, that is something that does take place. Okay, one way to explain it. Hispanics kind of in the same situation. A lot of them are first generation moving here, correct? And so they're moving here because they didn't have economic opportunity down in the country that they're coming from. And so they're moving here. So they are very highly percentaged uneducated. Asians, on the other hand, again, think about which Asians are able to move to the United States, right? Educated, successful, people that have the means, the money to be able to move here and make that relocation happen. And so, again, like I said, I think education plays a significant role. Here's a little bit of, that's not it. Here's some stats that kind of show that. Here is your percentage of whites that earn a college education. Here's blacks, men versus women. Here's Asians, okay? And then Hispanics. Hispanics are over here. I can't get the women's one to pop up for whatever reason. But either way, it's about 12%. Okay. So anyway, just kind of some stats that show you that. You don't have to have those memorized. It was just a talking point, give you something to kind of think about. Okay. Your assignment for today. Alrighty. And if you read the email already, you know this. You're going to read a couple articles. Okay. And these articles are coming from both sides. Notice the first one is written by a guy named John Stossel. Read them in order. Okay. And the other one is written by a guy named Jim Zarroli. Okay. And so at the very, very, very bottom of the articles, there are the questions. You can simply email me just your answers. That's completely fine. Okay. I'm going to give you a file with just the questions. It's going to look like this. All right. But if you read those articles and the place that you find those articles, all right, I'm going to email them to you, but I'm also going to, you can also locate them on PowerSchool. Anytime we have a reading, it's usually on PowerSchool. Things are a little bit different. It is extremely difficult for me to find your assignments on PowerSchool. Okay. I did it for the first assignment. Okay. But let's work with email only moving forward in terms of turning stuff in. It's going to greatly help my organizational challenges right now. Okay, so email only. Alrighty. Although you do have some access to some of this stuff, but they'll always be attached in the emails too. So, keep moving forward. I wore a Larry Bird jersey today. You guys ever heard of him? So. He's one of my favorite players. I don't know, just something a little bit different. I'm a little stir crazy too around here. So, hang in there. We've had, in terms of people turning stuff in, it has been really, really good. Okay. Other teachers are complaining that saying no one turns anything in. I think we're up to about the 75% or so. Okay. That have given me something. So some of you guys still got to catch up, but those of you that are doing it, keep grinding. Okay. Don't be afraid to email me with questions. A lot of you guys have been good about that. I'm trying to get back to you in a timely fashion. Obviously, there's a little bit of communication breakdown sometimes. And again, I have two kids that are doing e-learning too. So I know the process and I can understand the frustration, but keep communicating. We're going to get through this. Okay. And keep, staying positive and going forward with that. I will talk to you guys on Thursday. Okay.